Back in 1977, I participated in a renewal weekend associated with the Episcopal Church. During that weekend, I was introduced to the idea that all believers pray together whenever they pray. This was at the heart of the first prayer that we used each day, called a morning offering. That offering included a simple declaration: I unite myself in spirit and prayer with all fellow Christians and celebrations throughout the world. Clearly, the point was that we were praying together whether we were with others or whether we were praying alone. Praying this prayer, contemplating this notion of being connected to others, was like a bright light in the darkness for me. I had learned about the church. I'd learned about Jesus. I'd studied the faith. But often, these were just dry words. They were like the dry bones in Ezekiel's vision, and they required the Spirit of God to breathe life into them. In that morning offering prayer, I began to realize, for the first time in a way that I could feel and not just know intellectually, that we are never alone, ever. Even if we see no other person around us, we are still not alone. We are united with other believers and with Jesus Christ. Light. Light in the darkness. This experience for me was, to a certain extent, light in the darkness. And that idea seems to be, to me, an important image at this time in our lives. For we live now in a time when we are cautioned by medical experts to limit our contact with other people, to avoid any unnecessary contact, in the hope that we might limit the spread of an infectious virus, COVID-19, something you and I can neither feel nor see, yet the evidence around us tells us it is very real indeed. And this has changed our daily lives and will continue to do so, at least for the near future. After all, we're encouraged to work from home if we are employed. Many of our businesses have had to close their doors or change their mode of operation. Restaurants do takeout and no longer have customers sitting at tables inside. We're cautioned to observe social distancing, and social media and other media are filled with language like sheltering in place, terms I never thought I'd ever use. So how do we get by in these times? How do we get by when we are self-isolated or socially distanced? There are some technological ways to do this. We can make virtual connections. We can use programs or applications like Skype and Zoom, words that I've never thought I would ever use in a sermon, by the way. We can create virtual meetings. We can do virtual social groups, virtual church groups. But the lack of contact with others, the absence of church, social, or community gatherings can be, for some of us, a form of darkness. In the midst of this darkness, John's gospel tells us we are not alone. We are not really fully in the dark. At the beginning of the gospel, John wrote, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." Over and over, in the Gospel of John, from the wedding feast at Cana, through the meeting with Nicodemus in the dark of night, to the raising of Lazarus, John's Gospel tells us that the Word incarnate, Jesus Christ, is the light of all people. John's account of the raising of Lazarus is full of gritty details. Lazarus' sisters and their heart-wrenching sorrow. The length of time Lazarus' body had been in the tomb, and the warning to Jesus about that. Jesus weeping for his friend. And when Lazarus was raised and came out of the tomb, the burial cloths wrapped around the body. One can almost see Lazarus shuffling out of the tomb in John's clear language. But I always imagine one other detail. Lazarus' reaction to coming out of the darkness of the tomb into the light. Entering that light, and at the center of it is Jesus himself, blinding, intense, and yet full of warmth. Let me go back to the realization that came in that simple little prayer, that we are always connected to one another, and that the connection comes through the life that was the light of all people, the light that shines in the darkness, and that darkness cannot overcome. The morning offering that I mentioned includes this language. I offer all the prayers, works, joys, and problems of this day to the Father through the Son, my Lord and brother, in union with the Holy Spirit. I unite myself in spirit and prayer with all fellow Christians and celebrations throughout the world. You know that we are doing that right now. We are not all in the same place. I am here alone recording this sermon, and we may not be praying at the same time. However, and it is a big however, we are uniting ourselves in spirit and prayer with other faithful believers. There are other opportunities for us to do this throughout the weeks in the midst of this time of social distancing. Our diocese offers us access on its website to virtual Sunday worship, along with materials to do home worship, and other church organizations do the same. The Episcopal National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. offers virtual worship opportunities, and so do some of our monastic organizations. In particular, I'm thinking here of the Society of St. John the Evangelist in its house in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's an order dedicated to retreat and guest ministry throughout the church. But like the rest of us, the brothers have had to shelter in place and have closed their guest house to protect those who might come to it. Yet, they continue to worship regularly and to offer worship to the larger church. In particular, the brothers recorded their singing of Compline. They are, if you will, the bedtime prayers of the church. And they have made it available on their website, www.ssje.org, right on the front of that website. In doing so, the brothers invite us to join them as we and they conclude the day. If you choose to do this, you can follow along with the service using the Book of Common Prayer, for the brothers follow the Book of Common Prayer's order of the service. Or you can download their guest version of this, which includes the music that they chant. The brothers suggest that if we join them, we light a candle, a reminder of that light in the darkness, as St. John the Evangelist tells us in that gospel account. Finally, it is the brother's custom at the end of Compline for the leader of the service to sprinkle water on those present to remind them of their baptism at the close of the day. We might grab hold of that idea and adapt it, if you will. Let me encourage you during the coming week as you wash your hands, and I know you and I and others are all doing this quite often. But as we wash our hands, let us feel the water. Feel it as it flows over your hands and over your fingers. And as you do, remember the waters of your baptism and give thanks to God and for all those who pray with us. Amen.